There's a reason why some leaders thrive under pressure while others crumble. It's not about natural talent, charisma, or even experience. It's about a specific type of mental conditioning that separates extraordinary leaders from ordinary ones. And surprisingly, the blueprint was written centuries before the first business school even existed. When we talk about mental toughness in leadership, most people immediately think of that stereotypical image of the hard-charging, never-show-weakness executive. But that's not what real mental toughness looks like. True mental resilience in leadership isn't about suppressing emotions or bulldozing through challenges. It's about developing what the ancient Stoics called the discipline of the inner citadel. Let me introduce you to Sarah Chen, a fictional but representative composite of countless leaders I've studied. Sarah became CEO of a mid-sized tech company just 6 months before the 2020 pandemic hit. While her competitors were making reactive decisions based on fear and uncertainty, Sarah applied Stoic principles that helped her not just survive the crisis, but emerge stronger. By the end of 2021, her company had grown by 40%, while most others in her industry had contracted. What made the difference wasn't Sarah's technical expertise or her years of experience. It was her mental approach to leadership challenges, rooted in principles that Marcus Aurelius practiced while leading the Roman Empire through plague, war, and political upheaval nearly 2,000 years ago. The Stoic blueprint for mental toughness rests on 3 foundational pillars that directly translate to modern leadership effectiveness. The first pillar is what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control. In leadership terms, this means developing laser-sharp clarity about what you can actually influence versus what you cannot. Most leaders waste enormous mental energy worrying about market conditions, competitor actions, or regulatory changes they have zero power over. Meanwhile, they neglect the areas where they have complete control: their responses, decisions, and the culture they create. Consider the difference between 2 CEOs facing the same supply chain disruption. The first spends his energy complaining about global logistics, blaming external factors, and hoping conditions improve. The second immediately focuses on what she can control, communicating transparently with customers, diversifying suppliers, and strengthening relationships with existing partners. Both face identical external circumstances, but one approaches the situation with Stoic mental discipline, while the other becomes a victim of circumstances beyond his control. The second pillar involves what Seneca termed premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization. Before you dismiss this as pessimistic thinking, understand that this practice isn't about expecting the worst. It's about mental preparation that prevents leaders from being blindsided by challenges. When you've already considered how you would handle various setbacks, you're not caught off guard when they occur. Your decision-making remains clear and rational instead of reactive and emotional. I once worked with a startup founder named Marcus who exemplified this principle beautifully. Every quarter, he would spend time considering what could go wrong with his business. Key employees leaving, funding falling through, major clients canceling contracts, or new regulations affecting his industry. This wasn't anxiety or paranoia. It was strategic mental preparation. When a major client did suddenly terminate their contract, representing 30% of his revenue, Marcus wasn't devastated. He had already thought through this scenario and had contingency plans in place. His team was amazed by his calm response and quick execution of alternative strategies. The third foundational pillar is understanding the temporary nature of all circumstances, both positive and negative. The Stoics called this principle memento mori, and sic transit gloria mundi, remembering mortality and the transient nature of worldly success. For leaders, this translates into maintaining equilibrium during both victories and setbacks. When your company hits record profits, this principle prevents dangerous overconfidence and complacency. When facing significant challenges, it provides perspective that prevents despair and paralysis. Think about leaders who maintain consistent performance regardless of external conditions. They've internalized this Stoic understanding that current circumstances, whatever they may be, are temporary. This doesn't make them passive or fatalistic. Instead, it frees them to focus their energy on effective action rather than emotional reactions to temporary situations. The practical application of these three pillars creates what I call leadership equanimity. This is the ability to maintain clear thinking and effective decision-making regardless of external pressure or internal emotional turbulence. It's not about becoming emotionally numb or detached. Rather, it's about developing the mental discipline to separate your emotional experiences from your leadership decisions. Research from Harvard Business School supports what the Stoics understood intuitively. Studies show that leaders who can maintain emotional regulation during crisis periods make better strategic decisions, inspire more confidence in their teams, and achieve better long-term outcomes than leaders who become emotionally reactive under pressure. The ancient philosophy provides a practical framework for developing this modern leadership competency. But here's where many people misunderstand Stoicism in leadership contexts. They think it means being cold, unemotional, or disconnected from their teams. That's completely wrong. The Stoic approach to mental toughness actually makes leaders more effective at connecting with others because they're not consumed by their own emotional reactions. When you're not fighting internal battles with anxiety, anger, or frustration, you have more capacity to truly listen, empathize, and respond to your team's needs. The Stoic blueprint doesn't eliminate emotions or challenges from leadership. Instead, it changes your relationship with these inevitable experiences. Rather than being controlled by external circumstances or internal reactions, you develop the ability to observe them, assess them rationally, and choose your responses based on your values and objectives rather than immediate emotional impulses. This is particularly crucial in today's leadership environment, where change happens faster, stakes feel higher, and the margin for error seems smaller than ever before. Leaders who lack mental toughness become bottlenecks in their organizations, creating anxiety and uncertainty that cascades through their teams. Leaders with Stoic mental discipline become sources of stability and clarity that enable their organizations to thrive even in challenging conditions. The question isn't whether you'll face difficult leadership situations. The question is whether you'll face them with the mental tools to handle them effectively. In the next section, we'll explore how to actually build these mental muscles through specific practices that you can implement immediately in your leadership role. Mental toughness isn't something you're born with or without. It's a skill that develops through consistent practice, just like physical fitness develops through regular exercise. The Stoics understood this perfectly, which is why they developed specific daily practices designed to strengthen what we might call mental resilience muscles. The first practice is what I call the morning reflection protocol, based on Marcus Aurelius's habit of beginning each day with written reflections. As a leader, your morning thoughts set the tone for how you'll handle everything that comes at you during the day. Instead of immediately diving into emails or checking market updates, successful Stoic leaders spend 10 minutes each morning considering 3 questions. What challenges might I face today, and how will I respond with virtue? What aspects of today's agenda are within my control versus outside my influence? How can I serve my team and organization's highest good today, regardless of what external circumstances arise. Let me share how David Rodriguez, a regional manager for a logistics company, transformed his leadership effectiveness through this simple practice. David used to start every day feeling overwhelmed by his inbox and reactive to whatever crisis had emerged overnight. He'd arrive at the office already stressed and defensive, which created a negative atmosphere for his entire team. After implementing the morning reflection protocol, David noticed a dramatic shift. By spending just 10 minutes considering how he wanted to approach his day, he became much more intentional about his responses to challenges. His team started commenting on his increased calmness and clarity, even during busy periods. The second practice involves what Epictetus called the view from above. This means regularly stepping back from the immediate details of your situation to consider the broader context and longer-term perspective. In leadership terms, this prevents you from getting caught up in daily drama and losing sight of strategic objectives. When you're dealing with a difficult employee situation, budget constraints, or competitive pressures, the view from above helps you maintain perspective about what really matters. Practically, this might mean taking a 5-minute walk between meetings to consider how current challenges fit into your larger goals. Or it might involve ending each week by reflecting on what lessons you've learned and how temporary setbacks are contributing to longer-term growth. The key is developing the habit of regularly zooming out from immediate concerns to maintain strategic clarity. Here's a powerful example of this principle in action. When Jennifer Walsh became head of operations for a healthcare system during a particularly challenging period, she faced criticism from multiple directions. Doctors complained about new efficiency measures, administrators pressured her to cut costs further, and patients expressed frustration with longer wait times. Instead of becoming defensive or reactive, Jennifer applied the view from above. She recognized that her role was to balance these competing demands while serving the longer-term mission of providing quality health care. This perspective helped her communicate more effectively with each group and find solutions that addressed underlying concerns rather than just immediate complaints. The third daily practice focuses on what the Stoics called evening review. This involves ending each day by honestly assessing your performance as a leader. Not in terms of external results, which are often beyond your control, but in terms of how well you applied Stoic principles to your responses and decisions. Did you maintain emotional equilibrium during challenging conversations? Did you focus your energy on factors within your control? Did you respond to setbacks with resilience rather than reactivity? This isn't about self-criticism or perfectionism. It's about honest self-assessment that leads to continuous improvement. The most effective leaders I've worked with have some version of this practice, whether they call it Stoic philosophy or not. They regularly reflect on their performance, identify areas for growth, and make specific adjustments to their approach. But how do you actually build mental toughness when you're in the middle of a crisis? This is where the Stoic practice of present moment awareness becomes crucial. When facing high-pressure situations, most leaders either get caught up in anxiety about future outcomes or become paralyzed by regret about past decisions. Stoic mental discipline involves training yourself to focus completely on what you can do right now, in this moment, with the information and resources currently available to you. This doesn't mean ignoring future planning or learning from past experiences. It means not allowing anxiety about the future or regret about the past to interfere with your ability to make effective decisions in the present moment. When you're fully present and focused on current options rather than consumed by mental time travel, your thinking becomes clearer and your decision-making more effective. Consider the difference between two leaders facing the same budget crisis. The first spends mental energy worrying about potential layoffs, regretting past spending decisions, and imagining worst-case scenarios. The second focuses entirely on present-moment options. What information do I need to make good decisions? Who should I consult? What creative solutions haven't we considered yet? Both leaders face identical circumstances, but one is paralyzed by mental time travel while the other maintains focus on effective action. The fourth practice involves developing what I call emotional Aikido. In martial arts, Aikido practitioners learn to use an opponent's energy and momentum rather than opposing it directly. In leadership, this means learning to work with difficult emotions rather than fighting them or being overwhelmed by them. When you feel angry about an unfair situation, that energy can be redirected toward advocating for positive change. When you feel anxious about uncertainty, that concern can motivate thorough preparation and contingency planning. The key is learning to observe your emotional experiences without being controlled by them. This creates space between the initial emotional reaction and your behavioral response, allowing you to choose actions based on your values and objectives rather than immediate feelings. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't matter. It's about developing the ability to feel whatever you're feeling while still making rational decisions about how to respond. This skill becomes particularly important when dealing with challenging team members or stakeholders. Instead of becoming reactive to their difficult behavior, leaders with emotional Aikido skills can remain focused on productive outcomes. They don't take difficult behavior personally, and they don't allow others' emotional reactivity to trigger their own defensive responses. The transformation that occurs when leaders develop these daily practices is remarkable. They become more resilient to setbacks, more creative in problem solving, and more inspiring to their teams. They make better strategic decisions because they're not clouded by emotional reactivity or distracted by factors beyond their control. Most importantly, they create organizational cultures that reflect these same qualities. Resilient, focused, and oriented toward constructive action rather than reactive behavior. But building mental toughness through these practices requires consistency, not perfection. You don't need to become a philosophy scholar or spend hours in meditation. You need to commit to small daily practices that gradually strengthen your mental resilience muscles. Even 5 or 10 minutes of morning reflection, regular perspective-taking, honest evening review, and emotional awareness can create significant improvements in your leadership effectiveness over time. The true test of mental toughness isn't how you handle easy days when everything goes according to plan. It's how you make decisions when the stakes are high, information is incomplete, and everyone is looking to you for answers you're not sure you have. This is where Stoic principles become not just philosophical concepts, but practical tools that can make the difference between effective leadership and reactive management. The Stoic approach to decision-making under pressure starts with what Seneca called the discipline of assent. This means developing the ability to separate facts from interpretations, objective circumstances from emotional reactions, and what's actually happening from what you fear might happen. Most leaders make poor decisions under pressure because they're responding to their interpretations and fears rather than actual circumstances. Let me illustrate this with a story about Patricia Williams, a manufacturing division head who faced a perfect storm of challenges. A key supplier suddenly went bankrupt, leaving her without critical components needed for a major client delivery. At the same time, her 2 most experienced production managers gave notice, and a safety inspection revealed issues that required immediate attention and significant resources to address. Any one of these challenges would be difficult. Facing all 3 simultaneously felt overwhelming. Patricia's initial reaction was panic. Her mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. Losing the major client, missing revenue targets, potential layoffs, and damage to her career. But instead of making reactive decisions based on these fears, Patricia applied Stoic decision-making principles. She spent 30 minutes separating facts from interpretations. The facts were clear: specific challenges with specific timelines requiring specific resources. Her interpretations and fears were adding layers of anxiety that weren't helping her solve actual problems. Once Patricia focused on facts rather than fears, her decision-making became much more effective. She identified which problems required immediate attention versus those that could wait. She determined which aspects she could control directly versus those requiring collaboration or external resources. Most importantly, she recognized that while the situation was challenging, it wasn't actually catastrophic. Every problem had potential solutions, even if those solutions required creativity and effort. The second element of Stoic decision-making involves what Marcus Aurelius practiced during military campaigns: considering multiple perspectives before committing to action. Under pressure, most leaders narrow their focus and consider fewer options. Stoic mental discipline involves deliberately expanding your perspective even when time feels limited. This doesn't mean endless analysis or decision paralysis. It means quickly considering multiple approaches before choosing the most virtuous and practical path forward. This principle saved Robert Chen's technology startup from a potentially devastating mistake. When a major investor suddenly pulled out just 3 months before their planned product launch, Robert's immediate instinct was to accept the first alternative funding offer he received, even though the terms were unfavorable and would require giving up significant equity. The pressure to secure funding quickly was intense, and his team was counting on him to solve the problem. Instead of making a reactive decision, Robert applied the multiple perspectives principle. He considered not just the immediate funding problem, but the longer-term implications of different solutions. He explored creative alternatives, delaying the launch to bootstrap longer, finding strategic partners who might provide resources instead of just capital, or restructuring the launch to require less initial investment. By considering multiple perspectives, Robert discovered a partnership opportunity that provided both the resources he needed and strategic advantages that pure financial investment wouldn't have offered. The third component of pressure decision-making involves understanding what the Stoics called preferred indifference. These are outcomes that are generally preferable but don't determine your fundamental well-being or success as a leader. Profit margins, market share, individual quarterly results, and even specific business outcomes fall into this category. They're important and worth working toward, but they're not so critical that you should compromise your integrity or make decisions based on fear of losing them. This perspective is incredibly liberating for leaders under pressure. When you understand that specific outcomes, while preferable, don't define your worth or success as a leader, you can make decisions based on virtue and wisdom rather than desperation or fear. This often leads to better results because you're thinking clearly rather than reactively. Consider how this applies to difficult personnel decisions. Many leaders avoid addressing performance issues because they fear confrontation or worry about losing team members during busy periods. The Stoic approach recognizes that while maintaining full staffing is preferable, it's not more important than maintaining team standards and organizational effectiveness. This understanding gives leaders the mental clarity to address difficult situations directly and fairly, which often leads to better outcomes for everyone involved. Here's where the rubber meets the road in terms of practical application. When facing high-pressure decisions, apply what I call the Stoic decision framework. First, separate facts from interpretations by writing down objective circumstances without editorial commentary. What exactly is happening versus what you fear might happen? Second, identify what aspects of the situation are within your control versus external factors you cannot influence. Focus your mental energy entirely on the controllable factors. Third, consider multiple approaches, including creative alternatives you might not immediately consider under pressure. Fourth, choose the path that aligns with your values and serves long-term objectives, even if it's more difficult in the short term. The most powerful aspect of this approach is how it changes your relationship with uncertainty and pressure. Instead of viewing challenging decisions as threats to your success or security, you begin to see them as opportunities to practice virtue and develop wisdom. This shift in perspective dramatically improves both your decision-making quality and your ability to remain calm and focused when others are becoming reactive. But let's address the elephant in the room. How do you actually maintain this kind of mental discipline when you're facing real consequences for real people in real time? The answer lies in understanding that Stoic mental toughness isn't about being detached from outcomes. It's about being so clear about your values and so focused on virtue that external pressure can't push you into compromising your principles or making decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. Think about the leaders you most admire. Chances are they're people who maintained their integrity and made thoughtful decisions even under extreme pressure. They weren't perfect, but they were consistent in their approach to challenges. They didn't allow external circumstances to determine their internal responses, and they didn't make important decisions based on temporary emotions or immediate pressures. This is what the Stoic blueprint for mental toughness ultimately provides: the ability to be your best self as a leader, regardless of external circumstances. It's not about becoming invulnerable to challenge or immune to difficulty. It's about developing the mental tools to handle whatever comes your way with wisdom, integrity, and effectiveness. The most profound impact of developing Stoic mental toughness isn't just on your individual leadership effectiveness. It's on the culture and resilience of your entire organization. When leaders consistently demonstrate mental discipline, emotional regulation, and principled decision-making, these qualities spread throughout their teams and become embedded in organizational DNA. This is where ancient philosophy becomes modern competitive advantage. Let me tell you about Maria Santos, who became Chief Operating Officer of a regional healthcare network, just as the industry was facing unprecedented challenges from regulatory changes, staffing shortages, and financial pressures. Instead of treating these challenges as isolated problems to solve, Maria recognized them as opportunities to build organizational character that would serve her team long after the immediate crises passed. Maria applied what I call the Stoic leadership cascade, the process by which individual mental toughness creates systemic resilience. The first level involves modeling emotional regulation during difficult situations. Instead of expressing frustration about external pressures or displaying anxiety about uncertain outcomes, Maria consistently demonstrated calm focus on what her team could control and influence. This wasn't fake positivity or denial of real challenges. It was authentic demonstration of mental discipline that her team could observe and learn from. During particularly stressful board meetings where executives were pointing fingers and making reactive demands, Maria would calmly redirect conversations toward productive problem-solving. When staff members came to her with complaints about circumstances beyond their control, she would acknowledge their concerns and then guide them toward identifying actionable responses. Her consistent approach gradually shifted the organizational culture from reactive complaining to proactive problem-solving. The second level of the cascade involves teaching decision-making frameworks to your team. Rather than just making all important decisions yourself, Stoic leaders help their teams develop the mental tools to make good decisions independently. This means teaching the principles we've discussed, separating facts from interpretations, focusing energy on controllable factors, considering multiple perspectives, and choosing actions based on values rather than immediate emotions. Maria implemented what she called decision quality reviews in her team meetings. Instead of just discussing what decisions needed to be made, they would spend time examining how they were making decisions. When team members proposed solutions, she would ask questions that helped them apply Stoic principles. What assumptions are we making about this situation? Which aspects of this challenge are within our direct control? How does this decision align with our organizational values and long-term objectives? Over time, Maria's team members began applying these frameworks independently. They became more effective at handling challenging situations without escalating every problem to her. They made better decisions under pressure because they had practiced thinking through problems systematically rather than reactively. Most importantly, they developed confidence in their ability to handle whatever challenges arose. The third level involves creating organizational practices that reinforce Stoic principles. This might include beginning meetings with brief reflections on current challenges and opportunities, rather than immediately diving into tactical details. It could involve implementing regular perspective breaks during long projects where teams step back to consider how immediate tasks serve longer-term objectives. Or it might mean establishing protocols for handling setbacks that focus on learning and adaptation rather than blame and defensiveness. One of Maria's most effective innovations was what she called challenge debriefs. Whenever her team faced a significant difficulty, whether they handled it successfully or not, they would conduct a structured review focused on 3 questions. What did we learn about our capabilities and processes? How effectively did we focus our energy on factors within our control? What would we do differently if facing a similar situation in the future? These debriefs weren't about performance evaluation or accountability in the traditional sense. They were about building organizational wisdom and resilience. Team members learned from each other's approaches to difficult situations, and the entire organization became more skilled at handling uncertainty and pressure. Over 3 years, Maria's division became known throughout the healthcare network for their ability to handle crises calmly and effectively. But here's what's really powerful about applying Stoic principles to organizational leadership. It creates what researchers call psychological safety, while also maintaining high-performance standards. Team members feel secure expressing concerns, admitting mistakes, and taking calculated risks because they know their leader won't become reactive or punitive in response to challenges. At the same time, the focus on virtue and principled action maintains accountability and excellence. This combination is rare in most organizational cultures. Many leaders create either high psychological safety with low accountability, or high accountability with low psychological safety. The Stoic approach achieves both by focusing on character and decision-making processes rather than just outcomes. Team members are held accountable for applying good judgment, acting with integrity, and focusing their efforts effectively, but they're not punished for external factors beyond their control, or for outcomes that result from good decisions in uncertain situations. Now, let's address a common concern about applying Stoic principles in modern leadership contexts. Some people worry that this approach is too slow or philosophical for the fast-paced demands of contemporary business. This concern misses the point entirely. Stoic mental discipline doesn't slow down decision-making. It accelerates it by eliminating the mental clutter that creates delays and poor choices. When you're not fighting internal battles with anxiety, anger, or frustration, you can process information more quickly and clearly. When you're focused on controllable factors rather than worried about external circumstances, you can identify effective actions more readily. When you're guided by clear principles rather than immediate emotions, you don't waste time second-guessing or changing direction based on temporary setbacks. The leaders I've worked with who consistently apply these principles are actually faster at making good decisions than their more reactive counterparts. They spend less time in unproductive worry, fewer resources on crisis management that could have been prevented, and less energy managing the emotional fallout from poor decisions made under pressure. Consider the long-term competitive advantages that organizations develop when their leaders consistently demonstrate Stoic mental toughness. They become more attractive to high-quality employees who want to work for principled, stable leaders. They develop reputations for reliability and integrity that strengthen relationships with clients, partners, and stakeholders. They make fewer costly mistakes because their decision-making processes are based on wisdom rather than reactivity. They recover more quickly from setbacks because they focus energy on solutions rather than blame or regret. Perhaps most importantly, they create cultures of continuous learning and adaptation. Because Stoic principles emphasize character development and wisdom rather than fixed outcomes, these organizations become skilled at evolving and improving rather than just defending existing approaches. They see challenges as opportunities to develop capabilities rather than threats to existing success. The question that matters most is this: what kind of leader do you want to be when facing the inevitable pressures and uncertainties of significant responsibility? Do you want to be someone who becomes reactive under stress, makes decisions based on fear or anger, and creates anxiety in your team? Or do you want to be someone who maintains clarity and purpose regardless of external circumstances, makes decisions based on wisdom and virtue, and inspires confidence in others? The Stoic blueprint for mental toughness isn't just about becoming a more effective leader in the traditional sense. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle whatever challenges arise while maintaining integrity, creating positive impact, and helping others develop their own capabilities. It's about building the mental strength to serve something larger than your immediate comfort or security. This is ultimately what mental toughness means in a leadership context. It's not about being invulnerable to difficulty or immune to challenge. It's about having the character and wisdom to handle whatever comes your way while staying true to your principles and serving the people and purposes that matter most to you. The ancient Stoics understood that this kind of strength comes not from external circumstances, but from internal discipline and virtue. When you develop this kind of mental toughness, you don't just become a better leader. You become a better person who happens to lead. And that makes all the difference. Not just for you, but for everyone whose lives you touch through your leadership role. The Stoic blueprint for mental toughness isn't a theoretical framework that looks good on paper but falls apart under real-world pressure. It's a practical system that has been tested by leaders facing life-and-death decisions, existential threats to their organizations, and the weight of responsibility for thousands of people. From Marcus Aurelius leading the Roman Empire through plague and war, to modern executives navigating global crises, these principles work because they're based on fundamental truths about human nature and effective leadership. The three foundational pillars we discussed, the dichotomy of control, negative visualization, and understanding impermanence, provide the mental framework for clear thinking under pressure. The daily practices of morning reflection, perspective taking, evening review, and emotional awareness build the mental muscles needed to apply these principles consistently. The decision-making framework helps you choose wisely when stakes are high and time is limited. And the organizational cascade creates lasting impact that extends far beyond your individual leadership role. Remember, you don't need to become perfect at these practices overnight. Start with one element that resonates most with your current challenges. Perhaps it's spending 10 minutes each morning considering what you can control versus what you cannot. Maybe it's ending each day by reflecting on how well you applied your values to difficult situations. Or it could be practicing the view from above when you feel overwhelmed by immediate pressures. The key is consistency rather than perfection. Small, regular practice in developing mental toughness creates compound benefits over time, just like small, regular investments create compound financial returns. The leader you become through this practice, and the organization you create, will be fundamentally different from what's possible through purely technical or strategic approaches to leadership development. If you found value in this exploration of Stoic mental toughness for leaders, I encourage you to subscribe for more insights that bridge ancient wisdom with modern leadership challenges. The next video in this series will explore how Stoic principles can transform your approach to team building and organizational culture. Until then, remember that mental toughness isn't about what happens to you. It's about who you choose to be in response to whatever happens.